They were electric. When Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret shared the screen in Viva Las Vegas, the chemistry was so intense it practically melted the film. Off camera, it was even hotter. She wasn't just another co-star. Ann-Margret was the only woman who ever truly matched him in charisma, energy, and wild spirit. For a while, it looked like the king had finally met his queen. Everyone expected a wedding, but instead of walking down the aisle, Elvis walked away. Now, after all these years, Presley is finally revealing why he didn't marry Ann-Margret, how Elvis took over the world before 25. Before he became the king of rock and roll, the one who made girls scream and faint across the country, Elvis Presley was just a shy little boy struggling to keep up in school. Born on January 8, 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi, to Gladys Love and Vernon Presley, Elvis came into the world just 35 minutes after his twin brother, Jesse Garon, who was tragically stillborn. That loss would stay with Elvis for the rest of his life. He grew especially close to his mother, Gladys, and their bond was unbreakable. The Presleys didn't have much. They went to the Assembly of God Church, where Elvis first felt the stirrings of musical inspiration. Vernon picked up whatever odd jobs he could find, but money was always tight. Sometimes the family had to rely on neighbors and government food assistance. In 1938, Vernon was jailed for altering a check, and the family lost their home. In September 1941, Elvis started first grade at East Tupelo Consolidated School. His teachers thought he was just an average kid, nothing remarkable. But on October 3, 1945, something shifted. At just 10 years old, Elvis stepped onto a stage for the first time at the Mississippi-Alabama Fair and Dairy Show. He sang Old Shep and came in 5th place. It wasn't a win, but it was the start. A few months later, he got his first guitar as a birthday present. His uncles and the pastor from their church gave him a few lessons. Elvis later remembered, "I took the guitar, and I watched people, and I learned to play a little bit, but I would never sing in public. I was very shy about it." In 1946, he moved to Milam School for 6th grade and started performing at school. But kids can be cruel. Some classmates teased him, calling him a trashy kid who played hillbilly music. Still, Elvis didn't give up. He became obsessed with Mississippi Slim's radio show. Slim's brother, who was in Elvis's class, said the boy was crazy about music. Slim noticed too and taught Elvis some chords. When Elvis was 12, Slim lined up 2 on-air performances. The first time, stage fright took over, but the next week, he came back and performed. In November 1948, the Presleys moved to Memphis, chasing better opportunities. Elvis enrolled at L.C. Humes High School and quickly ran into more bumps. He got a C in music in 8th grade. When his teacher told him he had no talent for singing, Elvis showed up with his guitar the next day and sang "Keep Them Cold Icy Fingers Off Me," determined to prove a point. Some kids bullied him, calling him a mama's boy. In 1950, things started to change. Elvis began taking lessons from a neighbor, Lee Denson. Together with a few other boys, including Dorsey and Johnny Burnett, they formed a loose music group. He started standing out, not just for his voice, but for his style. He grew out his sideburns, slicked back his hair, and soaked up Memphis's blues scene. He fell in love with the flashy clothes at Lansky Brothers, and by senior year, he was wearing them, stepping into a new version of himself. Everything changed in 1953 during Hume's minstrel talent show. Elvis sang "Till I Waltz Again with You." He remembered, "I wasn't popular in school. I failed music. The only thing I ever failed." And then they entered me in this talent show. When I came on stage, I heard people kind of rumbling and whispering. It was amazing how popular I became in school after that. Elvis never learned to read music. He played by ear. He'd hang out at record stores, using listening booths and jukeboxes. He knew all of Hank Snow's songs and adored country legends like Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, and Jimmy Rogers. He was deeply influenced by gospel music, especially Jake Hess. He often attended all-night gospel singings where white groups performed songs rooted in black spiritual traditions. He listened to stations like WDIA that played race records, blues, spirituals, and early rock and roll. Those sounds left a mark. Artists like Arthur Crudup and Rufus Thomas would later shape many of his hits. By the time he graduated in June 1953, Elvis had made up his mind. Music was his path. That August, he walked into Memphis Recording Service, run by Sam Phillips, and paid to cut a 2-song demo, My Happiness, and That's When Your Heartaches Begin. Elvis later said it was a birthday gift for his mother, or maybe just to hear himself on a record. But according to biographer Peter Guralnick, he likely had bigger dreams. He was hoping to be discovered. In January 1954, he cut another demo, but again, nothing happened. He tried out for a local quartet and didn't make it. He auditioned for Eddie Bond's band, but that didn't pan out either. Meanwhile, Sam Phillips was on a mission, searching for someone who could bring the sound of black artists to a broader audience. In June, he gave Elvis a demo to try. It didn't quite work, but Phillips liked what he heard. He called in guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black for a session. On July 5th, during a slow session, Elvis suddenly broke into Arthur Crudup's That's All Right. Moore remembered it well. Elvis started singing, jumping around and acting the fool. Then Bill picked up his bass and joined in. Sam Phillips knew instantly. This was the sound. 3 days later, Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips played That's All Right on Red, Hot, and Blue. Listeners went wild. Calls poured in. Phillips kept replaying the song and even interviewed Elvis live, asking what high school he went to, just to confirm he was white. The trio also recorded Blue Moon of Kentucky, but gave it a punchy backbeat and Sam Phillips's signature slapback echo. That first single, That's All Right, and Blue Moon of Kentucky was the beginning of something electric, something the world had never heard before. And it all started with a shy boy from Tupelo who couldn't read music but knew exactly how to feel it. How Elvis took over music, movies, and America. On January 10, 1956, Elvis Presley stepped into the RCA Victor studio in Nashville for his first official recording session with the label. Alongside his regular crew, Scotty Moore, Bill Black, DJ Fontana, and pianist Floyd Kramer. RCA added guitarist Chet Atkins and the Jordanaires, with Gordon Stoker on backing vocals. That night, they recorded Heartbreak Hotel, which would be released on January 27th. Behind the scenes, Colonel Tom Parker was moving fast. He landed Elvis a spot on CBS's stage show for 6 appearances over 2 months. After his first TV appearance on January 28th, Elvis stayed in New York to record 8 more songs, including Carl Perkins' Blue Suede Shoes. Meanwhile, his older son's track, I Forgot to Remember to Forget, finally topped the Billboard Country chart in February. That same month, Parker officially became his manager, and things kicked into high gear. On March 23rd, RCA released Elvis Presley, his self-titled debut album. It combined 7 new RCA recordings with 5 unreleased Sun tracks, blending country, pop, and R&B. The standout, his Blue Suede Shoes cover, which rock critic Robert Hilburn praised as even better than Perkins's original. Instead of watering down R&B like many white artists, Elvis reshaped it, putting his voice front and center, swapping piano leads for guitar. The album became the first rock and roll LP to top the Billboard chart, holding the #1 spot. 1 spot for 10 weeks. Though not a virtuoso guitarist, Elvis's image, grinning with a guitar, helped turn the instrument into a symbol of rebellion. On April 3rd, he made his debut on The Milton Berle Show, performing aboard the USS Hancock in San Diego. The crowd of sailors and their dates went wild. Just days later, Elvis and his band had a close call when their plane lost an engine mid-flight over Arkansas. But the show went on, and by April's end, Heartbreak Hotel was his first #1 pop hit. Next came a 2-week run at the New Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas. The older conservative crowd wasn't impressed. Newsweek quipped that Elvis was like a jug of corn liquor at a champagne party. Still, while in Vegas, he signed a 7-year film deal with Paramount Pictures and kicked off a 15-city Midwest tour. He also adopted Hound Dog as his show closer, inspired by Freddie Bell and the Bell Boys' version of Big Mama Thornton's blues original. But backlash brewed. After a show in La Crosse, Wisconsin, the local Catholic diocese wrote to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, calling Elvis a definite danger to the security of the United States, noting 2 girls had his autograph written across their bodies. On June 5th, he returned to the Milton Berle show. At Berle's suggestion, he ditched the guitar and performed Hound Dog in a slower, more provocative style. The reaction was swift and harsh. The New York Times mocked him as a glorified bathtub singer. The New York Daily News called him vulgar and animalistic. Even Ed Sullivan said he was unfit for family viewing. Thus came the nickname Elvis the Pelvis, which Elvis hated. Despite it all, ratings soared. On July 1st, Elvis appeared on The Steve Allen Show, dressed in formal wear and forced to sing Hound Dog to a basset hound in a top hat, Allen's way of toning him down. Elvis later called it the most ridiculous performance of his career. That same night, on High Gardner Calling, when asked if he learned anything from the controversy, Elvis said, "No, I haven't. I don't see how any type of music would have any bad influence on people when it's only music." Just days later, Elvis recorded Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, and Any Way You Want Me, with the Jordanaires backing. Performing in Memphis that week, he addressed the backlash. "Those people in New York are not going to change me at all. I'm going to show you what the real Elvis is like tonight." By August, things heated up further. A judge in Jacksonville, Florida, ordered him to tame his act. In response, Elvis barely moved on stage, wiggling just his pinky finger in mock compliance. Don't Be Cruel and Hound Dog were released as a double-sided single and stayed at #1. One for 11 straight weeks. But while the king of rock and roll had an illustrious career, his love life was disastrous at best. The many women in Elvis Presley's life. Since he was the king of rock and roll, it's no surprise that Elvis Presley had a long list of women in his life before his untimely death in 1977. One of his early flings was with none other than Rita Moreno, the EGOT-winning actress who dated Elvis several times in the 1950s, not because she was in love, but to make her then-boyfriend Marlon Brando jealous. She figured no one would rile him up more than Elvis Presley himself. Still, she didn't find Elvis all that thrilling, calling him boring and ending things quickly. Another woman who did fall for him was June Juanico. The two met in 1955 and began dating, but it didn't last long. June once recalled that Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, preferred Elvis to be seen with showgirls and Hollywood starlets. By Christmas 1956, he brought one home, and that, she said, was the end for her. Shortly after the breakup, a short-lived romance also sparked between Elvis and Natalie Wood. The relationship was arranged by actor Dennis Hopper. Elvis went all out, renting out entire movie theaters, but Natalie reportedly wasn't impressed by the grand gestures. Her sister Lana later said it was Elvis's unusually close relationship with his mother that turned Natalie off. At one point, Gladys Presley even asked Natalie to sit on her lap, and that was it. Natalie called home and had her mother make up an excuse so she could leave. Elvis's 5-year relationship with Anita Wood began after he saw her on Top 10 Dance Party in 1957. But when Priscilla Presley came into the picture in 1959, Anita made the difficult decision to walk away. Saying goodbye to Elvis, she later admitted, was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. But the most famous woman in his life, of course, was Priscilla. They met at a party in Germany in 1959. She was just 14 and he was 24. Priscilla later described him as kind and genuine. Eager to be with him, she eventually moved to the U.S., and the two married in 1967. Their daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, was born the next year. Soon, rumors of infidelity and Elvis's growing drug use slowly eroded their marriage. They officially divorced in 1973, though Priscilla later said she never stopped loving him. Elvis, she insisted, was the love of her life. Even during his marriage, Elvis was linked to several other women. One was actress Connie Stevens, who once said she could have spent forever with him, but knew deep down it wouldn't work. In 1964, Elvis's chemistry with Viva Las Vegas co-star Ann-Margret became Hollywood legend. The electricity between them was undeniable, something neither of them could control. Still, the relationship fizzled out, and Ann-Margret later married actor Roger Smith. But Elvis's track record didn't end there. In 1972, he dated actress Sybil Shepherd. She remembered being taken by how sexy and magnetic he was, but ultimately ended things due to his worsening drug problems. Even so, she spoke warmly of their time together. After his divorce, one of his most significant relationships was with Linda Thompson, a former beauty queen and songwriter. They were together from 1972 to 1976. Linda once said that Elvis was drawn to her innocence. She was a virgin when they met, and he became intensely protective and jealous. But like many of his relationships, infidelity and addiction slowly tore them apart. Elvis's final relationship was with Ginger Alden, whom he met in 1976. Despite their 21-year age gap, they got engaged and remained together until his death. Ginger later shared how deeply Elvis loved his daughter, Lisa Marie, and how he often said he saw himself in her eyes. Sadly, Elvis's drug problems and numerous affairs was not the only problem he had. In fact, someone he literally trusted with his life ended up being a backstabber. How Elvis's right-hand man managed to scam him. Elvis Presley was no doubt one of the biggest stars in music history. He had the looks, the voice, the charm, and even his own private jet. Yet, despite all that fame and fortune, he never performed a single concert outside the United States. The farthest he ever traveled with that jet? Honolulu. The reason wasn't Elvis himself, it was his manager, the infamous Colonel Tom Parker. Parker blamed the decision on logistics, security, production demands, too many moving pieces. But the real story? Parker wasn't even an American citizen. Born Andreas Cornelius van Kuyk in either 1909 or 1910 in Breda, Netherlands, he had entered the U.S. illegally. Leaving the country could have exposed him, potentially barring him from ever re-entering. So instead of risking it, he kept Elvis grounded. Some believe Parker's past may have been even darker than just immigration fraud. Biographer Alana Nash suggested in The Colonel that Parker might have fled the Netherlands after committing a murder. After disappearing at age 19, he popped up in Tampa, Florida in the early 1930s with a new name, Tom Parker, and a made-up hometown, Huntington, West Virginia. Parker's early days were spent working as a traveling carnival worker for royal amusement shows, where he learned two core rules that guided him forever: always have a gimmick, and always aim for the lowest common denominator when entertaining people. That carny mindset never left him. To dodge the World War II draft, he quickly found a woman to marry, although no official marriage license has ever been found, and managed to secure a 4H deferment thanks to a hernia. In the mid-1940s, Parker took a job at the Humane Society, managing a pet cemetery and rounding up stray dogs. It was an oddly fitting gig for someone who would later be known for burying careers and profiting off them. During fundraising events, Parker noticed that hillbilly singers were the biggest draw. That was all he needed to pack up and head to Nashville, chasing country stars. He began managing acts like Roy Acuff and Minnie Pearl, then moved on to bigger names like Hank Snow and Eddie Arnold. He was slowly climbing the ladder, but none of them were his ultimate goal. That came in 1955, when Parker convinced Elvis's parents, Gladys and Vernon Presley, to sign a contract making him Elvis's exclusive manager and representative. What they likely didn't realize was that Parker basically saw himself as Elvis's owner from that point forward. To Parker's credit, he was instrumental in Elvis' explosive rise. He negotiated an unprecedented $35,000 deal to buy out Elvis's Sun Records contract and move him to RCA. Then he orchestrated one of the most strategic PR campaigns in showbiz history. Using his carny smarts, Parker pioneered now-standard celebrity management tactics. No interviews, money up front, carefully controlled media appearances, regional buzz building, advanced teams, and mass merchandising. He practically invented the idea of the superstar brand. When Elvis was drafted into the Army, Parker supposedly cut a deal with the military to get him a relatively cushy posting in Germany. After his service in 1960, the Colonel steered Elvis away from albums and touring and into Hollywood. Elvis was hesitant, but ultimately agreed. The result? A slew of campy, forgettable films, Clambake, Kissin' Cousins, and others that critics panned and fans tolerated. In exchange for his management, Parker took a whopping 25% of everything Elvis made. But the deal was more manipulative than it looked. Biographer Peter Guralnick explained that if Elvis earned, say, $750,000 for a movie and 50% of the profits, Parker took his 25% cut of the base salary and then claimed half of the profits as a joint venture, arguing that his promotional efforts were essential to the film's success. The same shady math applied to Elvis's record deals. And then there was the publishing hustle. Parker realized early that the real money wasn't just in performing songs, it was in owning the rights. He insisted that Elvis get half the publishing on any new song he recorded. Many songwriters refused, of course, but others went along, giving Elvis co-writing credit, even on hits like Heartbreak Hotel and All Shook Up, despite his minimal involvement in writing them. Parker's crowning achievement may have come in 1970, when he transformed Elvis into a Las Vegas institution. After a record-breaking comeback in 1969, Parker landed a $1 million-a-year deal with the International Hotel, requiring just 8 weeks of performances annually through 1974. It sounded like a dream contract, but it was also the beginning of a dark spiral for Presley. Vegas fueled his drug dependency and paranoia. It also became Parker's personal downfall, as he developed a serious gambling addiction and burned through his fortune. As Elvis deteriorated, Parker's grip only tightened. Presley had reportedly been searching for a new manager at the time of his death in 1977. But when that day came, the Colonel didn't fly to Memphis. Instead, he jetted off to New York City to work on Elvis-themed product deals. At the funeral, he wore a Hawaiian shirt and baseball cap and never even looked at the casket. Despite Elvis's death, Parker kept cashing in on his legacy. RCA eventually sued him in 1982. That's when he finally came clean about his immigration status, revealing in court that he wasn't a U.S. citizen or a citizen of any country for that matter, so the court technically had no jurisdiction over him. Colonel Tom Parker died in 1997. Of the estimated $100 million he made from managing Elvis, less than $1 million remained. The rest had vanished, most of it gambled away. His legacy, like his life, was a mix of brilliance and exploitation. And while he may have helped create a legend, he also helped break the man behind it. The many tragedies of Elvis Presley's life. 47 years ago, millions of fans around the world were shattered by the news. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was dead. He was just 42. Elvis died bloated, sick, and a shell of the man who changed music forever. His girlfriend at the time, Ginger Alden, found him unresponsive, face down on the bathroom floor of his Graceland mansion. He was rushed to Baptist Memorial Hospital, not the closer Methodist South, because the staff there was known to be discreet. But even the secrecy couldn't save him. Doctors tried to revive him, but at 3:30 p.m., Elvis Presley was officially pronounced dead. Back at Graceland, the truth was spelled out in the medicine cabinet. It was packed with amber vials and white tops stuffed with medications in quantities that no legitimate doctor would ever sign off on. That same afternoon, 3 pathologists, Drs. Eric Muirhead, Jerry Francisco, and Noel Floredo, performed a 2-hour autopsy. Then, at 8 p.m., Dr. Francisco, who had only observed the procedure, took it upon himself to inform the press that preliminary findings pointed to a cardiac arrhythmia and that drugs weren't a factor. That wasn't just misleading, it was a flat-out cover-up. Muirhead and Florado later admitted that the statement had been made at the family's request in an effort to protect Elvis's public image. After all, how would it look if the rock star, who'd once been handed a badge from President Nixon's Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, had died of a drug overdose? But when the toxicology report came back weeks later, there was no hiding the truth. Elvis's blood showed sky-high levels of dilaudid, Demerol, Percodan, codeine, and Quaaludes. The doctors also found he was suffering from severe chronic constipation, glaucoma, and type 2 diabetes. His health was a ticking time bomb. Elvis didn't die in some glamorous rock star haze. He died the way many opioid users do. He was on the toilet, straining hard to pass a bowel movement, a move that put intense pressure on his heart and aorta. The likely cause of death? A massive heart attack that dropped him face first onto the floor. But his constipation wasn't ordinary. The opiates he abused relentlessly caused vicious digestive issues. He took painkillers, sleeping pills, tranquilizers, barbiturates, hormones, and then laxatives to undo the damage they caused. A major enabler in all of this was his longtime physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, nicknamed Dr. Nick. He started treating Elvis in 1967 for what was described as saddle pain, but that quickly spiraled into a full-blown addiction. During a hearing before the Tennessee Board of Health, Dr. Nick admitted to prescribing thousands of doses of addictive pills, claiming he often gave Elvis sugar pills just to slow the habit. He insisted he was trying to keep Elvis from buying drugs on the street. Amazingly, the jury believed he was acting in the best interests of the patient, a conclusion many doctors would call absurd. Dr. Nick was acquitted. In 1980, he was indicted again for overprescribing drugs to Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis, and again walked free. But his reckless behavior finally caught up with him in 1995 when his license was permanently revoked. Even after his death, theories kept rolling in. Some experts pointed to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a genetic heart condition marked by thickened heart walls and a tendency for sudden cardiac arrest. Combined with his obesity, poor diet, diabetes, enlarged heart, and years of drug abuse, it made for a perfect storm. Like other tragic icons, Michael Jackson and Prince, Elvis surrounded himself with people who fed his addiction. His life ended in isolation, in a mansion that had become more of a prison than a home. But long before the loneliness, the bloated body, and the chaos of Graceland, Elvis Presley had known something rare, something real. Before the pills and the heartbreak, there was a time when he was alive in every sense of the word. And for a brief, burning moment, that aliveness had a name: Ann-Margret. Why Elvis Presley didn't marry Ann-Margret. Elvis Presley's life took a sharp turn in 1963, the moment he stepped onto the set of Viva Las Vegas. That film didn't just give him another leading role, it brought him face to face with Ann-Margret, the woman who would steal his heart. Their connection was instant, electric. On screen, they were explosive. Off-screen, they were inseparable. What started as a film set fling quickly became something deeper. Ann-Margret later described their bond as that of soulmates, and it wasn't hard to see why. They spent nearly every waking moment together during filming, and even after the cameras stopped rolling, they met up in secret whenever they could. In her memoir, she said it was other commitments that kept them from staying together. But in a later interview, she revealed that Elvis hadn't wanted to let her go. He wanted more. He wanted forever. The problem? Back at Graceland, Priscilla was waiting. She and Elvis weren't married yet, but they were in a long-term relationship, and she had no idea what was happening in Las Vegas. Until she did. When the truth came out, all hell broke loose. Priscilla later wrote in Elvis and Me that when she found out how serious the affair was, she flew into a rage. She admitted that she picked up a flower vase and hurled it across the room, shattering it against the wall. Her reaction was volcanic, and it worked. Before long, Elvis ended things with Ann-Margret. Ann-Margret recalled in her memoir that they had continued seeing each other on and off for nearly a year. But eventually, everything stopped. They both knew it had to end. Elvis had a life back home, and he had made a promise to honor it. But that wasn't what he really wanted. According to Ann-Margret, Elvis had told her he wished they could stay together. They had even talked about getting married. The fantasy of building a future together wasn't just hers, it was his too. Still, she understood that other forces were pulling him away. She once wrote that Elvis had always been honest with her, but the situation was complicated and confusing. When asked, years later, why she ever began the affair knowing Priscilla was at home, Ann-Margret replied simply, "Priscilla wasn't there." It all came crashing down after false tabloid reports claimed Ann-Margret had spoken to the press about their romance. Whether he believed it or not, Elvis cut off contact, and that was the end. Just a few years later, on May 1, 1967, Elvis married Priscilla. Exactly 1 week later, on May 8, Ann-Margret married TV producer Roger Smith. The timing felt more than coincidental. But if anyone expected the feelings to fade, they were wrong. The love between Elvis and Ann-Margret didn't die. They may have gone their separate ways, but that connection, the one that started on a Vegas film set, lingered. Quiet, unresolved, real. Do you think Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret would have made a lovely couple? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.